Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder, episode 39. With me today is the partial panel, and so let's go and introduce everybody. Let's start from the bottom and welcome Big Jeff first. Hey, Big Jeff, how are you doing this evening? Nice to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Jeff. Sorry I could only sneak in at the end of the last episode, but I had some business to take care of. But it's good to be back today with Dr. Silkman and Jack. Looking forward to doing some hardcore analysis on on the case. We got a case to solve, so we better get to it.
Oh, yeah, that's the kind of attitude I want to hear. Get me fired up, Big Jeff. Dr. Silkman, what about you? Are you fired up and ready to go?
I'm always fired up there, Jeff, and I'd like to welcome everyone on the panel and everyone in chat. The last episode we did was really, really great. Great to see him here, and let's get on with it, guys. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Let's get on with it. Fired up and ready to go. You can pick your poison on that one, Jack. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back, and I'll obviously welcome Big Jeff being able to join us. And of course, Kel's, I think she's, working or whatever she has to take care of. So I know she'll probably be listening in. So want to say hello to the live chatters has joined us. And last week was really good. I think we kind of ended up with we were talking about Scott and Bobby and that whole interaction. So yeah, I'm definitely fired up. Let's do it.
He's going to hunt deer right behind your trailer,
Yes,
but you don't hunt deer right behind your trailer.
occasionally, yes.
So you figured since you saw him driving east on Highway 147, he must be going hunting.
Yes,
Anybody else see you going west on 147 to go hunting, so far as you know?
Bobby Dassey.
We're going to figure out whether what we've got here is a murder that was committed by one or two people. Let's say, hypothetically, Bobby Dassey and Scott Tadych. A car moved a couple times and ditched close to Scott's house. Then we've got another bit of illegality going on where the police find the car and decide to move it onto the Avery property. That's the way the killers benefited from the cops wanting to frame Stephen Avery instead of wanting to solve it. And really, that it's Coburn is amazing to me.
Really, this echoes what we discussed in the last podcast. Now, let's look at this from the most simplest point of view, and that is Scott and Bobby had nothing to do with the disappearance of Teresa Hallbach. But can you see through circumstances, it puts the spotlight on both Scott and Bobby. So, and what Kathleen Zellner was saying was, hey, isn't that rather remarkable that you've got Scott and Bobby potentially in the same vicinity and time as the victim, but worse than that, guys, they're in the same vicinity as the victim's vehicle. So can you see that you have the possibility of guilt by association? And isn't it rather remarkable that on November the 5th, you've got Pam and Nicole Sturm finding the RAV4 on the Avery salvage yard on November the 5th, and suddenly guilt by association, the focus is immediately on Stephen Avery, as pointed out by Jack 61 with the phone call of Dennis Jacobs. Do we have Stephen in custody yet? So you can see that if you're going to set Stephen up, you need to move. If there is the RAV4 at the turnaround, you need to bring it onto the Avery salvage yard. Guilt by association. As soon as they find the RAV, it means that they can get their search warrant. They've got due course. End of story. But you have to admit, for a period of time, it looked very dodgy for both Scott and Bobby.
I mean, I think you guys probably went through this very deeply in the last podcast, but minimally, it kind of says that the investigation needed to go deeper than Stephen Avery, which it did not. You know, you can argue whether it was a case of myopia, where myopia is kind of a disease where you can't see anything but what's right in front of your face. Um, I tend to think it was a frame job from the very beginning, and it made it this certain circumstances made it very much easier to point to Stephen Avery. But at the end of the day, I think it's clear even to the casual observer that the case called for a deeper investigation into more subjects than were deeply investigated, and not for the if it weren't for a few pieces of key planted evidence, those suspects would have had to been looked at. For example, the blood in the RAV4. That made it very easy to focus the investigation on Stephen Avery. That's why it's the most important piece of evidence to dispute. But just put it aside for a second, and there's a whole slew of suspects that need investigating very, very deeply. And so when I say that they needed a whopper to overcome their the 1985 case, that's what I mean. And they got it with the blood on the wrap. So that's, to me, why that piece of evidence is particularly suspicious.
Yeah, 100%, Big Jeff. It's called tunnel vision and investigative bias. And you're right, Big Jeff, because the only way you're going to switch the focus on anybody else, Bradley Check, Ryan Hillegas, a whole lot of other people, is that you find the RAV4 on the Avery salvage yard. And of course, the RAV4 contained Stephen Avery's blood and also the blood of Teresa Horbach. So you've got two different DNA samples present in the RAV. Boom. So it is very important not to forget is that if you have set Stephen up, you've got to basically ignore any other lead or leads that point to anybody else. Otherwise, your plan of setting Stephen up to take the fall falls apart. So hence, anybody seeing the vehicle off the Avery salvage yard, you ignore. You basically do not follow that lead up. Because Bobby was able to alibi Scott Tadych and vice versa, you accept it and you go no further. So all the focus and attention was on Stephen. The only person in Wisconsin who happened to have a $36 million civil suit at the time, right, Jack 61?
That's right. And while you guys have been talking, I've been listening. And the last episode I was talking about pulling up these two different statements of Scott Tadych, November 10th, 2005, November 29th. And I knew there was a difference, so I got him confused. November 10th, he said that he didn't work that day because his mom had surgery and that's where he was. Then he comes home around, whatever time, around this time frame, change clothes and, to go hunting for a little while. The November 29th statement, he says he did work that day. I'm going to pull them up and show you if Jeff wants to show them, just so everyone knows that.
Absolutely.
All right. Just 1 second here.
I mean, you guys don't even really need to ask. Just tell me you want to show something or share something. That's cool.
Okay. For some reason, that's not.
I'm not going to say no to you.
Well, you might, but
no, absolutely not, Jack. I won't hear it. I won't hear it. There's a point where you're looking for that. There's a couple things that I wanted to pull out, and one of them is that I go back and forth on whether the RAV being seen there was that reliable eyewitness testimony, and I go back and forth. But listening to the statement when we just did, I think it might have been in the last episode, he says that he's a truck driver, and that he knows the roads, and that is kind of a big deal to me. It's not just somebody, it's somebody that drives the same roads all the time and knows the conditions and sees things that are in order or out of order. And that kind of resonated with me. And the reason that I bring back to that statement is if you are going to believe that the RAV was at this turnaround, and you're going to start from that principle that you do in fact believe that it was at this turnaround, then it's not really much of a stretch to believe Tom Sawinski, just saying a couple people pushed it from there, because it's not that far, and it's within the realm of reason to be able to push a vehicle from that turnaround. And that's where I think that if you accept the premise that the RAV was there, it's really not that hard to accept a couple guys pushing it from there.
Well, you didn't even have to push it the whole way, right? That's the thing, is that you could have driven it part way or even most of the way, and perhaps made an argument that they didn't want to alert anybody who was possibly on the yard. If it's the people who Sawinski said it was, or Bobby Dassey, would have known that Dolores Avery was still on the salvage yard, ready to go, leaving with Stephen in the morning, for example, right? So she would have still been there in the early hours. Stephen himself would have been there. They would have known that Earl Avery wasn't due at the salvage yard until, something like 8 a.m. That truck had already gone. So yeah, there's this small stretch of houses you got to get it by that you don't want to potentially alert anybody. So you can pretty much drive it all the way down 147, turn it off, and then push it in if that's what you're worried about. I'm not saying that that's exactly how it happened, but it's logical. And there's more than one person besides Ramlow that says it. Even Robert Fabian, who was the person who was hunting rabbits with Earl Avery on October 31st, claimed that he saw that vehicle, or a vehicle parked in that turnaround. A woman named Jill Stein, a guy named Irvin Konecki, although it's not clear whether that was the correct turnaround. But there are, when more than one people meet, and these people, it's not like they're in a cabal, right? It's different people. There was clearly something there. You can maybe convince me that it wasn't Teresa's vehicle, maybe, right? But the thing is, why are so many people saying that it was there? It's not, it's Occam's razor that there was certainly a car there. And Robert Fabian changed the story. He said, "Oh well, the head, after talking to Earl Avery, it wasn't the right shape headlights." But it's still, that's an awful, late time to change your story. And awfully convenient for, the police. I don't like it when people change their stories like that. But yeah, it's hard for me to believe that there wasn't a car there, given the disparity of people coming from a bunch of different places that actually saw it there.
Well, Big Jeff, you make a good point, right? The searchers go all out to put out flyers, posters, and there's also, remember, Pagel on November the 3rd, the night of November the 3rd, right? Jack 61 contacted the media immediately. So there were reports out in the media, no doubt newspapers, and the flyers posters were placed all around the area. So it seems rather ironical that you go to all that effort and you give a description of the victim's vehicle, and people are reporting that they saw a vehicle matching the victim's vehicle, a description, same type of vehicle. So hence, why won't you investigate it? Why won't you write a report about it? It's counterintuitive, guys.
And on top of that, they put out an alert on the evening of the 3rd at 6:43 p.m. to everyone on patrol. So it wasn't like like it was hidden. Okay, there's the first one. This is the November 10th report, and it's down just a little ways. I was trying to highlight it, but it's not doing right. Anyway, if you go down to the third little section here where it says Mr. Tadych was asked about Bobby Dassey and stated that he knows him socially from interviewing him, interacting with him at family gatherings. He states that he thinks that Bobby is about 19 or 20. Mr. Tadych stated that on Monday, 10/31/2005, he didn't go to work that day because his mother was in the hospital in Green Bay, right? So it goes on, and they go through. All right, let's look at this is the November 10th interview with, we can look here and see who all was involved. I think it was Skorlinski and, I'm sorry, it's on up one more page. Investigative report. Actually, it doesn't say it's got the approval, but I think it was Skorlinski and so it probably tells in there. Anyway, then that's not really what I was driving at. This is
Martinez, Antonio Martinez. It said it right there.
Did it?
Yeah.
There it is. Yep. And then the backup was Daniel. See, these guys here, I don't know who they are.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're not Manitowoc or
no, they're DCI.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, it says right there Milwaukee arson and Milwaukee narcotics. So they're not even Madison, which is that would be the state, that would be the central of DCI,
or Appleton.
Or Appleton, right, which is the local field office, right, in Appleton.
That's right. That's
right. And then they have one in, so they bring people all the way from Milwaukee, which, I mean, just to remind everybody, that's the largest city in Wisconsin.
Well, if you look at all the reports that we do have, there's probably 45 or 50 different DCI agents that were involved in one way or another. These two here, I'm just telling you, I just don't remember seeing any other reports by them. Anyway, that's the November 10th. So he says he didn't work because mom had surgery and he was up in Green Bay. This is the November 29th interview, and it's Skorlinski, and we'll look here in a minute and find out who was in it. Said Skorlinski advised Tadych that he would like to go over the Tadych's activities in the afternoon and evening of Monday the 31st, 2005, which was Halloween. Tadych said that after work that day, he arrived home at approximately 3:15. He said he quickly changed his clothes to go deer hunting and left his residence. Tadych said he was driving west on State Highway 147 just outside of Mishkot. He observed Bobby Dassey driving his Blazer east on State Highway 147. He believed he passed him near the Christmas tree farm. Tadych found out later that Bobby was going deer hunting, and he hunts on land adjacent to Tadych's residence. So this is a totally different statement than what he made 19 days prior. And no red flags that's a major red flag to me. I'm not a cop, guys, but I think we could ask Sapper Cop. He was a cop. Maybe even another, more current investigator. To me, that's a red flag. There's actually several. What changed? What happened in 19 days?
You'd think that this would be very easy to verify. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Scott Tadych have that kind of job where you actually had to punch a clock when you went into work?
Yep, that's right.
So it seems like that would be easy to verify whether he was at work or not. People know. People trying to keep track of him. I do remember the story the most of his mother having surgery.
Yeah.
And he came back and he got Barb, right? That's the whole reason he got Barb, was to bring her to see his mother who had just gotten that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the two that were reporting this interview was Skorlinski and Heimerl, both out of Appleton. So anyway, you got to ask yourself what transpired, what happened that would force this change of narrative. Big change of narrative, actually. Didn't go to work one day on the 10th, and on the 29th he did go to work. Now, I realize it's been a few weeks since all that happened, but it's a pretty significant day. At minimum, his mom had pretty major back surgery. So anyway, I thought it was important to point
I agree.
out.
The thing is that he'd been asked about it, right? I mean, if he was asked, for the first time on the 29th, you can see maybe his recollection being fuzzy because it's just another day. But if you're asked a second time about it,
yep,
how does your story change so much? I mean, is it really? I mean, why wouldn't the cops say, okay, well, does it refresh your memory to say that you said this on the on the 10th? Isn't that what they're supposed to do? Is to sort of probe the changes in story? Why wouldn't
Well,
they?
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
yeah,
why
that,
wouldn't they put that information here?
that's exactly what Dean Strang did when he questioned him during the Stephen Avery trial.
Yeah.
When Scott Tadych was referring to the height of the fire, Strang actually brought one of his early statements right in front of him, right, and says, "Oh yeah, does this refresh your recollection?" So Strang was definitely onto the fact that Scott was changing his
Narrative.
stance on certain
Yep.
narrative on certain things. Yeah, so he picked it up.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
got
another
folded
thing.
like a wet rag, right? And he
Well-
folded like a wet rag. He said, "Oh yeah, well." Strang asks him, "Was your recollection, probably better shortly after, or was it better, at this later date?" And he like
It's
walks off to.
Yeah, it's extremely infuriating, right? Because clearly people are changing their narrative and their story. Now I understand that recollections do change, and as I said to you before, normally the very first statement given by a witness is often the most accurate one, and over time the story is embellished or enhanced, and convenient facts are often left out that help inculpate a particular person. So when you look at the very first statements that are made, they're normally the most accurate ones. And Scott clearly was changing his narrative and story, that the fire kept on getting bigger. And then when Strang pointed out to him, "Oh, wait a minute, in one of your very early statements, you said that the fire was only 3 foot tall." He goes, "Oh, yeah, that's right." So hence, Kratz was wanting the
Scott.
fire to be 10 feet tall. And then
Yep.
Scott goes, "Yeah, that's right. It was only a small one." It goes to show how ridiculous it really was.
Well, it's even worse than that because he said the fire was the biggest thing he remembered from the day. That's how badly he embellished that story, which was a far cry from his first statement, the November 10th. We could read the whole thing. It's available. There was no fire. He didn't even mention the fire at all.
Well, yeah, that's right. And you think about it, right? Scott was there to get Bob, right? Scott
Yeah, that's
wasn't
right.
there to observe Stephen or Brendan or any fire. It meant nothing to him. It's the investigators that honed in and said, "Well, did you see a fire? How big was it? Did you see anybody else there? Did you see Stephen? Did you see somebody else?" And Scott obviously had very little knowledge of any fire, but he had to embellish it. He had to go along with the narrative.
Well, and then that brings up back the question, the end result that we always talk about, or what we see that somebody says. So what happened? What was said to him to get him to say that? And that had to be Skurlinski or this other guy or possibly, even Kratz or Fallon. What was said to him to get this embellished? I know O'Kelly interviewed him. He made a specific trip to Manitowoc in March or April, I'm sorry, 2006, specifically, and took Scott I guess, out to eat to talk to him. Just Scott. No one else was there. I think Barr was at work. So something clearly was said to him to embellish this narrative over time.
Did his police record disappear? I've heard that story.
It's actually, if you look at O'Kelly's notes, what he turned in to get paid back, it's in there. We've got it. You didn't know about O'Kelly making a specific trip over there to take him out?
That's the first time I've heard this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, because I dove deep into O'Kelly and his actions and what he did, and I mean, there's still a hearing with O'Kelly from 2009 that they won't let me have. It's still sealed. They won't let me have it. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let that go because I want to get mad and I can't talk.
Well, you could imagine, guys, that there would have been subtle, idle threats, You know, oh, we're just here. We just want to have a discussion with you. We want to make sure that you weren't involved in this, right?
Yeah.
And remember Deidre when he was talking to Bobby Dassey, how Deidre said, "Oh, look, you know, we're not into things like planting evidence, or we wouldn't do anything like that, etc., etc." So I think, you know, sort of like, well, were you involved? Yes or no? Well, if you weren't involved, do you have an alibi? Right? So
Oh,
just small idle threats.
you were referring to the interview with Bobby when they were in the car
Yeah,
and they went on that
correct.
damn tirade. Oh my God.
Correct, correct. And that's rather remarkable that someone like Deidre, I forgot the other officer that was with him, will start doing all this crap and talking all this smack to Bobby Dassey. And all they were trying to do, remember that they were there to bring Bobby to the hospital to get
That's
a
right.
DNA sample and photographs of any injuries or whatever. And they
Yep.
went into this ridiculous tirade about, no, we wouldn't dare set up Stephen. Hint, hint.
Right.
So to prevent us from moving on, I just thought it was one of the things that Kathleen Zellner says at the very end of this quote. But now that we understand how litigious Andrew Coburn is, she basically came flat out and just accused him of being involved in the plant job. But you notice that Coburn didn't sue Kathleen Zellner. I wonder why that is.
The last thing that Colburn would want is to be called on the stand and have Kathleen Zellner question him. That's something that you want to avoid at all costs, Big Jeff.
No way. No way
100%.
he would tangle. No way he would tangle with her. No way.
There's some people that you muck around with and others that you avoid at all costs. And Kathleen
Right.
Zellner is one of them.
Yeah,
Remember
you know, and I think additionally to that, though, lawyers are not like they have a little bit more leeway. Like being Stephen Avery's lawyer and involved in this case gives her a little bit more legal ability to make accusations of people, and it's going to be harder to sue a lawyer, an active lawyer in the case for that. I'm not a lawyer, as I've said many times, but I've heard this from other lawyers, and so there is a little bit of leeway that lawyers are given. So I mean, we do have to remember that it's not just a normal person out there making these statements, and it does certainly make for good documentary, though, doesn't it?
Well, the thing is that Kathleen Zellner has said all these remarks about a lot of people, right, including Ryan Hillegas, Bobby Dassey, and others. Well, hey, you want to clear your name? Come and talk to me, and that's it. And many have refused to do exactly that.
Give me an affidavit. Tell me what. Tell me your story. Put it in an affidavit. Swear on it. We're done. And I want to make this statement here too. I'm not accusing Scott or Bobby, or I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything. They have the presumption of innocence. We have to remember that. We have to, but we also can't ignore what's right in front of our face. We just can't, because if we do, we're being a little bit hypocritical. So the end result of these statements and this massively changed statement in 19 days is a real red flag for me. For whatever reason, how that happened, that's what I want to know. Also, I have a suspicion that these were recorded and it wasn't put on the because it wasn't put in these reports, because typically when the DCI makes a report, if they record it, it's entered. You can see it in the header somewhere. They'll say that. But I found that's not always true, because I know Jody was interviewed on November 6, 2005 by Deb Strauss and John Dettering, and I'm 99.9% sure there is a recording. I've asked the DCI for it. That's one that's probably the oldest one I've got that I'm waiting on, because I'm sure it is, because I wrote that on the second or third week of August last year. I still don't have it. They didn't say, hey, there's no such recording. We don't have that. That's not what they said at all. So that tells me there is a recording, and it is not listed anywhere. So anyway, these two recordings of November 10th and November 29th, I would not be surprised if there's recordings of both interviews.
You've gone over Exhibit 138.
Yes, sir.
It describes you receiving a telephone call 1994 or 1995 from someone who identified himself as a detective, correct?
Yes.
The detective indicated that there was a person in custody who had made a statement about a Manitowoc County offense, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what that person in custody had said was that he had committed an assault in Manitowoc County and someone else was in jail for it, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that much you're pretty sure of.
Let's go to Stephen Avery's civil rights case. Coburn getting the call about them having evidence, favorable evidence, exculpatory evidence that Stephen was not the rapist. What did they do with that evidence? They concealed it by not writing a report. What do we have now in our murder case with Teresa Halbach? We have, once again, Andy Coburn having a conversation with an independent witness who has absolutely no reason to lie and not writing up a report that this witness is telling him Teresa Halbach's car is right down the road on 147 by the East Twin River Bridge. Why was that not written up in a report? Because if it had been, Stephen Avery could never have been convicted of Teresa Halbach's murder.
Yeah, the thing that I just wanted to quickly point out, and then I'll give it over to you, Doc, and that's this is just a little excerpt that I picked out. They withheld it. We withheld information by not writing a report. And those words were just echoed from all of us for, it seems, the past 2 hours and into the previous episode, that this just continues to be a theme since day one. That's how they do it. They just don't write a report, just like the blood spot that we played in the last episode. Well, maybe they went out there, but they didn't write a report. So that's another method of how they withhold information. So I'll hand it over to you, Doc, to add your comments.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's very important. And one of the themes that we're investigating and looking at is the potential for tunnel vision and investigator bias. To me, this is another example of tunnel vision, right? Somebody must be in charge of the reports, because whether it was Gilbert or whether it was Colburn, clearly there is no report of Ramlow going up to an MTSO officer and saying, hey, look, I think I've seen the victim's vehicle. It is literally just up the road. Now, quite clearly, you don't want a report saying that, oh, yeah, we found the victim's vehicle, it was here, because that would destroy the narrative, right? But the other bizarre thing, of course, is that during the flyover on the 4th, they actually would have flown over that area right over there, where around the turnaround, because they're around the Avery salvage yard and neighboring counties for several hours. They were looking at roads, they were looking at ditches, they were looking everywhere. They never spotted the RAV, right? So it begs the question, was the RAV4 actually moved? If it was found on November the 3rd, was it moved to a temporary spot? And then on the evening of November the 4th, then planted onto the Avery salvage yard. Now, I'm not sure, how you factor in Sawinski's observation, et cetera, but quite clearly, there are independent citizens that have seen a vehicle that matched Teresa Halbach's car off the Avery salvage yard. And the state's narrative is very, very simple and straightforward. Neither Teresa nor her RAV4 ever left the property. So hence, why are all of a sudden independent witnesses seeing Teresa Halbach's vehicle off the Avery salvage yard? So it's all a matter of looking at the chronology and the timing, right? Now, quite clearly, You don't want to report an official police report that says, yes, we found Teresa Horbach's vehicle at the turnaround, because, as Kathleen Zona said, that's incredibly exculpatory. You don't want a report like that. But quite clearly, right, who's controlling the reports? Now, we know that Colburn doesn't write reports until many years later, right, guys? Or unless somebody tells him to write a report. So that's in keeping and in tune what Colburn actually does. That's his MO. He doesn't write a report immediately.
So it's a huge, huge event having a Brady violation like this. And isn't it ironic? It's the same cop.
Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, this is Lynn.
Lynn,
Hi, Andy.
you run Sam William Henry 582.
Okay, it shows that she's a missing person, and it lists to Teresa Hallback.
Okay.
Okay, that's what you're looking for, Andy?
99 Toyota.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye.
So what we believe happened is Coburn gets that information from our witness on the 4th, and he's calling in that license plate number. Then we discover on Ryan Hillegas' phone records on November 4th, there are a series of calls that are made to him with no caller ID, which in talking to the phone company, they thought it was most likely law enforcement. They're every couple of minutes, and there's 22 of them. And they end right around 7:25, which is when Chuck Avery calls Stephen Avery and says that he sees headlights down in the pit behind his house. We think what happened is that Ryan Hillegas is there possibly with law enforcement when the cars moved, and he's dropping calls as they're trying to direct him, because that's what happened to us in the quarry. The calls would drop. They had to have probable cause to get on the property. So it's clear it's all contrived to have Ryan Hillegas involved in knowing where the car is and letting Pam Sturm know where the car is. And then bingo, when they've got the car, they've got probable cause. Then they've got all those search warrants, and they can go into Stephen's residence 6-7 times, the garage, all of that.
I believe it was in the pre-trial testimony, Jack 61, if you could remember. I think it was in the pre-trial where they spoke with Ryan Hillegas, and he even admitted that calls would be dropping, right? And it's almost like an embedded confession, because Ryan stated that, well, you know,
Reception is really bad out there.
Reception is really bad out there. Now, how in the hell would he know about the reception out there? Because he stated he's never been on the Avery salvage yard.
He shouldn't have known that, Doc. He shouldn't have known that at all.
No, 100% correct. But do you notice the ruse that was set up? We wanted to make sure that if someone finds something, that they immediately call the sheriff. And that's exactly what Pam Sturm did. And it's interesting that Ryan said about bad phone reception, and he had 22 very short calls, no caller ID, one day before the RAV4 is found, and ending at the same time that Chuck sees lights near his place. You couldn't even write that up. That's another man miracle, right, Big Jeff?
It sure is. Now, I can tell you something that's not a miracle. Is that in order for those phones to show up on his cell phone record, he actually has to answer those calls. For those calls that are that duration, those are not voicemail messages, because they would show up sort of as being forwarded to a different number to go to voicemail. So he answered those calls, and there were 22 of them, and he couldn't remember what any of them was. That's beyond belief. I can tell you something else. And remember, we've said we've debated, in a very friendly way, Dr. Silkman, about the type of expert that Dean and Jerry would have been better off getting. And I've said, well, a cellular expert would be good. You're like they should have had a better forensic expert.
Yes.
I can tell you for a fact that just because that call shows up as no caller ID, that doesn't mean the phone company can't identify the number, right? So had Dean and Jerry actually had Ryan's phone bill, and I don't believe they did. I don't believe they got his records like Kathleen Zeller did. They could have subpoenaed the phone company for the identity of those phone calls, because it doesn't say it on Ryan's bill. It is, and I got news for you. They do know who it is. They might not now. That is perishable information. They're only required to keep records for so long. A lot of times, it's actually more work to get rid of records than to keep them, because purging information actually takes effort. But it wouldn't surprise me if that information was gone, especially if I'm not sure who Ryan had for a cellular company, but a lot of them have come and gone over the years, and those records do kind of go away. But if at the time Dean and Jerry had those records, they definitely could have found out the identity of that caller.
Yeah,
and that's another sad thing.
I think he had Altel. Altel, I think I could look.
Yeah. That's one that's gone now, I think, right?
Yeah.
Bought up by one of the biggies, one way or another.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing, of course, is the encounter that that Ryan had with Pam Sturm that morning of November the 5th, because Ryan Hillegas and Scott Blowdorn gave only Pam Sturm a camera, a map, and Sheriff Jerry Pagel's direct phone number. And I actually found the passage. It's only a short one. You don't mind if I read it, guys? It is from Stephen Avery's pre-trial. And Ryan Hillegas said, I quote, "I gave Pam Sturm, I gave her Jerry Pagel's number that morning." Now note what he says. "The cell phone coverage out in that area is absolutely horrid. And to get a call out to," he stopped, "most of the time when I use my phone out there, I only had 30 seconds or a minute to talk before your phone cut off on you." Now, isn't that a golden nugget embedded confession right there? How the hell did he know that? Because he has been there. He has been there, guys.
Yep.
What else could it mean? I can't think of what else it could honestly mean besides that.
It just opened the whole thing up.
We discussed on the Man Miracles podcast how it was an absolute miracle that out of the 4 hours of flyover, we only have this 3 minutes of footage near the Avery property.
And it's a miracle they got the worst videographer and worst video editor of all time, because it always cuts right before you get a chance where it supposedly is going to cover the area where the RAV was recovered. It's for some reason the videographer and the editor, they didn't see that as a priority. Let's just put it that way.
I think the videographer had epilepsy.
Oh, well, you know who the videographer was? It was Baldwin.
The new chick.
The new chick. I won't. I'll stop right there. But it's rather remarkable, guys, and I think we know why the flyover video was so heavily edited, and I'll tell you why. Because had the plane gone down the lane where the RAV4 was eventually found on November the 5th, and there clearly was no RAV4 there, then that's highly exculpatory, right? So quite clearly, you don't want to have any video footage potentially exculpating or exculpating Stephen Avery. And it also means that someone, a third party, brought in the RAV4 on either the night of November the 4th or the early morning of November the 5th. You do not want that exculpatory evidence on videotape.
Can you imagine Doc and Big Jeff and Jeff, how the locust would have descended on the Avery salvage yard had that RAV been found on the afternoon of the 4th at the flyover? They
200
would have
people
immediately.
shown up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. 200 people would have shown up. And Jack 61 and guys on the panel and in chat, you trying to tell me that law enforcement weren't ready to go in? They were locked and loaded. They were ready to descend on that place. However, they didn't see a RAV4. And I agree with you, Jack 61. Had there been even a hint of a vehicle looking like a RAV4, they would have gone on there with a search warrant for due cause. Oh, look, we just want to check it out. But notice the strategy that they use, guys. The police, law enforcement didn't go on the property to find the RAV. They used a member of the public
They had to
find the RAV. So law enforcement were at arm's length. What a complete and utter joke.
Yep, because
they had no probable cause.
They had no probable cause to get a warrant. That's exactly right, Big Jeff.
Hey, kind of a change of plans here. Okay. The boss has got something he wants us to do. Okay. He wants us to go back over and re-interview Avery again. And the search party is out there, and he wants us to ask them if they would allow us to have the search party come on the property and go through the junkyard. Okay. So if it's okay with you, we'll meet you over at your sheriff's department. Okay. If you don't mind, help us out. That's fine.
And by the way, the boss is Pagel. Sheriff Pagel is the boss. Now notice what Wiegert says to Remiker about the change in plans. There was no doubt, and in fact, we even found the transcript of it. Pagel wanted to get the searchers, right, the private citizen searchers, to go on the property to help search for Teresa and the RAV4. In my opinion, Pagel knew then and there that the RAV4 was on the property, as in someone had planted it, right? Because the sheriff's office has a tip line where anybody can call in a tip. In my opinion, just so it didn't look so contrived, the change in plans was, we know where the RAV4 is. We need a member of the search party to go, a random citizen to go in and alert us of the RAV4. And lo and behold, who finds the RAV4? A cousin of Teresa Hallbach, who happens to have the direct phone number of the sheriff, who phones up Wiegert and says, we have a change in plan, right? Now, don't you find that's another incredible red flag? Big Jeff, that's another man miracle.
Right, I need to play the music.
Another one.
It is. You forgot to mention she also had a camera.
Scott
given to
Blowjohn's
her,
camera.
lent to her by Ryan.
Correct. Scott Blowjohn gave his personal camera. So in other words, guys, we're not stupid. We can see what happened. They knew they had foreknowledge of where the RAV4 was. All they had to do was set up the ruse whereby a private citizen can walk into the property and miraculously find the RAV, call in the sheriff, and 200 people descend within an hour. That is truly remarkable. Jack 61.
Well, here's your other big clue as to what you're talking about and the tunnel vision and ready to go. Look at the difference, and we've talked about this recently a couple of times. Look at the difference in the reaction to the Avery salvage yard when the RAV is found. The RAV, just the RAV. And then when Christine and Rudy's remains are found, they get a few people piddling around, and that's about it. The Avery salvage yard gets descended upon as again the locust arrived, and they arrived in force. And by what 2, or probably actually before then, I'm not exactly sure when they locked it down, but it was quick that they locked it up.
Within
Locked the road.
within 30 minutes, the place was in lockdown. Within 30
Yeah.
minutes, it happened so quickly. Now, mind you, law enforcement knew nothing about that RAV and what had happened
Nope.
and how that RAV4 got there, but the place was in lockdown very quick.
That's right. And with
So
Christine Rudy, she gets just basically ignored. Go ahead, Big Jeff.
No, finish the Christine thing.
No,
That's a great point.
no. Well, no. That's basically it. It's just the disparaging difference between the two cases.
Huge.
Yeah,
huge
definitely. So isn't it the case that Remaker's Pagel's nephew?
No.
No. Okay. I'd heard that. I'm glad it's dispelled. If it's not true.
He's related to Kacerik.
Kacerik. Okay.
Kacerik. Tom Kacerik.
So certainly Remaker is one of the ones that plays ball here, and it just if we listen to again what Wiegert says, about the change of plans, Remaker comes back and says, okay, you can just, I mean, it's not normal phraseology. It's you can tell Wiegert is kind of holding back on the words that he wants to use because he knows damn well the lines that he's talking on are recorded.
Yep.
And they're very careful about what they say, and the phraseology that he uses is very weird to the point where Remaker goes, okay, he says the okay that he gives is not really, just this normal course of business. It's kind of, to me, it's a suspicious, okay, what's the rest of it? And I know by the way that you phrased it in the first place that it's gonna be weird. But wasn't it convenient that that this change of plans happened? And wasn't Remaker the first officer on scene at the Avery salvage yard? Among the first.
Among the first.
Well, there was one other that was the first one. I can't think that. I just heard that. I just played that dispatch call recently, and I really had not heard of this guy, but he was actually the first one there, and I think Remaker was right behind him.
Yeah. So how convenient, right? How convenient that Kacerik's boy is one of the first on the scene because of the change of plans. Yet another miracle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
There are red flags everywhere.
No matter where you look, there's nothing clean anywhere.
But I think the big giveaway here is the rapidity of how quickly Pam and Nicole Stern found the RAV4. When you consider that neither of them have ever been to that property before, they had no knowledge.
And the path they took, Doc, that's the real
miracle.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, we're going to go over that in a reading with the crew. Once you see it, you know it's a scam. Immediately a scam.
You can't unsee it once you see it.
Once you see
Teresa's cousin Beach was there the day before. I assume they searched it. They probably searched for a good couple of hours, right?
I don't believe David Beach actually, because I read the report. It doesn't actually say that he searched the property. He went up to the office, the main office. I believe he spoke with Chuck and then Stephen. And Stephen told David. David was there with his sister, and basically Stephen was very cordial, very open. He was himself concerned, but basically I think he was there to. He asked Stephen, did Teresa come over here? Yes, she came over here, took a photograph, and then left. It doesn't say in the report that David actually went in the property and searched. He may have, remember. But it doesn't say in the report, Big Jeff.
It just seemed like I read another accounting of that, what you're talking about, Doc, and they said if you go down in there, you're gonna have to be careful because it's really muddy. You're gonna get stuck.
Correct.
Yeah.
There was a vehicle. Now this is the interesting thing. Apparently there were a group of searchers before Pam and Nicole who went in a car, used the car and got stuck in the mud on November the 5th. So there were other people there searching prior to Pam and Nicole. Now that's very interesting.
It is.
Up over.
You talking about the hole in the post there? Mm-hmm. I definitely believe that there's a hole there. Other people think it's bird crap.
Could be.
But
crap.
why would they? I'll get the photo if you want. Why would they put a piece of tape there? See?
There it is.
And right there.
You can see it right there. Yeah. That white piece of
Right
tape.
there.
So it does kind of look higher than what I was looking at earlier, but something there anyway. There's something there anyway, and they marked it, so it's interesting.
They marked that window. They marked that window. They also marked the back as well. I'm gonna get to it. I promise. Oh wait, here's some more. They marked here and here.
I don't know if there was any fingerprint dust
Blood.
left in the county after they got to this thing.
Blood.
Yeah, what is
See? This is where they found the blood. It's also marked. You can see the edge of the red tape right there. They've cropped it.
Hey, can you keep that photo up for a second there, Jack? Yeah,
Yep.
So they cropped that up. I'm gonna toggle back, and I want you to see if you can see those orangish red stains on this picture.
I don't think you can. Not with the camera that Pam used.
There's a lot of resolution in those pictures. So if you look at the ones, there's multiple pairs of that, multiple copies of that picture. And I think the actual pictures from Pam Sturm were released in a FOIA because they have very, very high resolution. And one case, were reduced, I think, to JPEG. So if you look at the RAV from, I think it might have been Henberry's FOIA. And I think that there's at least one set of those pictures that have the full camera resolution, which is very, very good. And the ones that got released at the beginning did not, were quite pixelized, or had some type of compression, perhaps JPEG compression. Look around.
Unfortunately, we don't have too many that are true high def like you're talking about. We have a few, but like I said, not many.
The Pam Sturm ones, the Pam Sturm ones from the camera were high res.
As long as we're looking at it, why don't we explain what this stain is? This stain was tested.
Go ahead, Doc. You explain this one.
Well, I'm really concerned by looking at these stains here because I think it was Groffy or Stolke, one of those individuals had to actually point to the presence of blood on the back door of the RAV4 to Cherie Cohane. So she had obviously missed it. I don't know whether the staining that we're seeing here is in actual fact blood. In order to prove that it's blood, you've got to do a presumptive test. I'm not prepared to call it because that looks too obvious for Cherie Cohane to have missed it. I don't know what that is, whether that's due to the fact that they had fingerprinted the RAV4, and it could be just due to dust or a chemical process. But I'm seeing a picture at the back of the RAV in the crime lab, where you can clearly see that the RAV4 is a deep blue color, and you cannot see that stain, and there's no tape on the back of the RAV either. You know, Jack 61, where you pointed it out, that there were tape pieces of tape.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a photograph of the RAV4 in the laboratory of the back of the RAV, and
Yep.
you do not see that stain, and you do not see any tape on it, and there's certainly no evidence of a bullet strike at all.
And look, this photo was taken. It said the metadata is saying September 5th, 2006.
Yeah.
And those crime lab photos would have been taken damn near a year earlier, at least
Correct.
but
Correct.
10 months, 11 months.
Yep.
You know, we zoom in on this. Oh, go ahead, Doc.
I personally would not put any precedence on what you're seeing there. You want to make sure that you're looking at the RAV the day it was taken off the Avery salvage yard, not months later. You don't know what you're looking at there.
I do want to zoom in on it again, though, Jack, if you can. And I'm seeing it on the black, but I'm also seeing two smudge marks that look like finger smudge on the actual paint on the right side of the black. You move your cursor right there, right there. That to me looks like two fingers, two side of the two fingers. That's what I see. So we'd have to imagine that no matter what the stain that's there, this is a highly used area of the vehicle. So the fact that there's some smudge of some whatever, I mean, we don't know that it's blood, but that to me looks like finger marks. I mean, hey, looks like it's two different things. So.
There were fingerprints on the back door, and there also was blood, A23, and that was swabbed by Colhane, and she only got a partial DNA profile. But I don't think A23 looked like anything like that.
Well, I mean, if this was, I don't disagree with you, Doc, but let's just say that this was, and this is blood, and it's just kind of faded because it's been there for, a year. There's plenty there to get something from if it was actually there.
If that's blood, there's a ton of it. Definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to this other mark here. That's as far as I don't think I can zoom in. Yeah, as far as I can zoom with the browser. But there's definitely something in this area that's never explained. It's never talked about. I don't know what it is, but they marked it for a reason. There's another photo. I'm going to have to look for it. I'll find it later tonight, and I'll send it to you. But you can actually see a mark in the post here. I don't know if it's a hole, a bullet hole, an arrow hole. I don't know.
Jack 61, I'm looking at the picture of the back of the RAV in the crime lab, and it looks like a little ding. A little ding.
Definitely something.
Yeah, a small indentation.
Right. That would seem right to me. And that could be why people thought it was a bullet, because if you grazed a bullet, grazed it, right? It's not a bullet, but if a bullet had grazed it, it might leave an indentation and not go through. So I can see why someone would jump. But you can see right there. Look at how they cleaned around it. I mean, look at that. There's a squarish triangle shape where they cleaned it, and then
that's right.
They wanted to make sure that they got it, or they didn't, or they prevented it from being dusted. Maybe that's what, instead of cleaning it, they put something over that so they didn't dust on top of there.
I just have to wonder, why did they mark it? What attracted their attention to that?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we maybe that's a good place for us to wrap up for today.
How many minutes did we make it?
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, we made it. About 30 seconds, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where we left off in the last episode. So
it was a good job. A good job.
Yeah, we did a good job. We're all good boys for the work that we did here today. And so I personally think this is a real fun episode. We kind of got to explore a little bit. I like when we do that and take a side trip down some pictures there. But getting into the meat and potatoes of the case, like we're really hitting, the call with we have a change of plans and going back out, and so finding the RAV, we're really hitting our stride in the series. And with that said, I will hand it over to Big Jeff to lead off the wrap-up comments and summations for today.
Well, I think you did a great job for the limited amount of time that we covered, introducing what the topics were. I like to call this Kathleen Zellner at her finest, where she is doing a deep dive into the evidence. It's very important to her, and it's a strategy of hers that differs, according to her, from very many post-conviction attorneys. That's important to her to find the real killer. I mean, I think in any case, it's important to her, if she's going to get a retrial for her client, to have a believable narrative that's going to exonerate them, assuming that they get a new trial in the first place. And Kathleen Zellner is indeed making a plausible case. And we opened the podcast by discussing the apparent myopia and the lack of intellectual curiosity of the police and not investigating people who were there, and not investigate, meaning Tadych and Bobby, not investigating the presence of the RAV at the turnaround, not more deeply investigating Ryan's 20-some dropped phone calls when they easily could have figured out who it was, had they had his records by subpoena. So I mean, Kathleen Zellner is spot on. She's convinced of Stephen Avery's innocence to the point where she spent several $100K of her own money, and she's no dummy. And through moves of what I call the highest integrity, she continues to investigate. It's really fun to watch her go down this path, even though we know that some of the things that she has found or will uncover, are either have gone by the wayside because they've been procedurally barred, or because we have since discovered new evidence. It's not stopping her from digging deeper and deeper. It's fun to watch. It's important. Let me rephrase that. It's important to watch what Zellner does, because what she does needs to be taken very seriously. The wrongful conviction in the United States is the percentage of wrong convictions, even if it's 0.000001, that's too high. But unfortunately, it's much higher than that number, and people are getting exonerated at an alarming rate. And it's not alarming because they're exonerated; it's alarming because they're in there in the first place. Just so nobody accuses me of that. So people like Kathleen Zellner are to be applauded. The judicial system, which makes it increasingly difficult to protect the verdict, is something that needs to be, no matter what side of the political aisle in which you sit, no matter how you feel about crime, it's just not. It's so wrong to take away somebody's liberty undeservedly. It's better that people go free who are guilty than people get locked up that are innocent. And it's critical that everybody's on the same page on this. So with that, I guess I'm going to turn it over to the next before I spend another 20 minutes railing on about wrongful conviction.
Well, no worries, Big Jeff. We definitely have the platform for you when you need to do that for sure. Dr. Silkman, if you wouldn't give us your summation for today, would much appreciate.
I just want to say that world order has been restored with Big Jeff, with his fantastic summations. I really enjoyed the summation. Big Jeff, of course, is spot on. Personally, I really enjoyed this episode because we started to deep dive into what I consider to be one of the most important pieces of forensic evidence there is in this case, the finding of the Toyota RAV4. It's very interesting that the Foul Play team, if I could just put a little plug, we are looking at this particular area right now in our podcast, and we're going to be deep diving into how Pam of God, how Pam Sturm found the RAV4. And once you see it, you will not believe your eyes what she accomplished. And I just want to echo Big Jeff, what he said about Kathleen Zellner. She clearly was causing a lot of issues for the state because she was providing an alternative narrative that was different to what the state put forward. And I personally believe a much more believable narrative. And you can see by the actions of the state, they do not want Kathleen Zellner anywhere near the RAV4. The question must be why. I think we all know the reason why. Thank you very much, guys. And thanks to everyone in chat. It's been an awesome episode. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doc, and thank you for your summation there. Really appreciate those comments. And Jack, if you wouldn't take the responsibility of leading us out of, can you believe it, episode 39?
Yeah, I kind of got a sidetrack there. We started talking about the RAV, and of course, I start yanking pictures from all corners of the globe. And it is interesting. I do have to echo Big Jeff and Doc about Kathleen Zellner. She's a really intelligent lawyer. She always seems to try to be at least several moves. It's a chess game, and trying to stay this one step to the side, a more reasonable narrative than what the state told, which we've discussed. A lot of these things are just so quacky and cumbersome to get through when you start talking about what was presented. The zipper encounter. I call it an encounter because that's what it was from beginning to end, and it's weird. All of it. It doesn't fit. It's cumbersome to really get through, and it not really be questioned deeply. Goes into Ryan and Scott Blodorn. They were never considered suspects, and they were never really questioned in that manner. Well, why not? They were in Teresa's life every day. So why weren't they investigated? And then rolling back around before I end it, talking about what Big Jeff touched on, this politicizing of our courts. And I mean, there's always been some element here and there, I'm sure, for decades and decades. The politics kind of messing, at least to some degree, with our justice system. And now it's rampant. And it makes me sick to think about how bad it is. I know Big Jeff feels the same way. He's kind of like me. This politicization of our legal system from top to bottom. It affects so many people, destroys lives, families, friends. And as far as I'm concerned, right now, Brennan is definitely a political prisoner. There's no doubt about it. He's a pawn. And they got meat hooks sunk deep in that kid. They screwed him. They continue to screw him. Every day that he's there is just another screwing that kid got from the last, 17 years. So, anyway, with that said, been a great episode. Looking forward to the next. Thanks, guys.
Thank you thank you so much to Jack. Appreciate that. So, for Big Jeff, Dr. Silkman, and Jack, this is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.